Adrienne Truscott. Please come see my show, Adrienne Truscott, the One Trick Pony at Joe's Pub on June 27th. I'm talking to Rabbi Sol Solomon on Dave's Gone By.
Oh, shalom, damn it. This is your old friend, Rabbi Sol Solomon, talking about theater, talking about comedy, talking about performance art. So much to talk about with our guest in the neighborhood today. Her name is Adrienne Truscott. She is a performance artist and a rape victim. Now, I'm not making fun of that, but sometimes she does in her shows. For example, she used to be part of the neo-vaudeville troupe, the Wow Wow Sisters. She's a multi-award winner, including from the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. She has taught at Wesleyan and Sarah Lawrence and Yale. Now, she's doing One Trick Pony. She's doing it at Joe's Pub on June 27th, and we're going to talk to her about that and all the other performances that she does. Shalom and welcome to the neighborhood, Adrienne Truscott. Hello.
Hello, Rabbi. That was an extraordinary introduction. Thank you.
Yeah, I tend to do those. I'm very proud of this. So let's go right to the meat of the matter, as it were. The stuff that you do in terms of women's issues, in terms of male aggression, in terms of rape, is that easier or harder or just different now that we're in the so-called hashtag #MeToo era?
I would say maybe it's a little bit, I don't know that easier is the word. Maybe it's a little less rare. Maybe more people are delving into that topic as part of their comedy material. And I think it's kind of weird but safe to say that if you're a woman in the world, making jokes about male aggression or assault or that kind of thing is actually just observational comedy.
Oh, okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Ooh, we're gonna have an interesting talk here. So, do you see virtually everything in terms of male versus female, much the way that black people see black versus white in almost everything?
I wouldn't say I see everything as male versus female. I would say I notice the world through the lens of growing up in a female body and walking around the world in a female body. I do see a lot of that. I suppose I also see it as a white person. I notice a lot of things about being a woman in the world. I don't think it's the only way I see, but I think a lot of people who walk through the world at different intersections, whether they're race or gender or sexuality, really notice the world through those lenses.
So let's say you go through a typical day, a day when you're not necessarily performing, but you're shopping. You're going on maybe the subway, you're going on in a car, you have to do certain errands, you have to get work done. How many times, at what stages do you feel the world is looking at you as a woman in a way that I don't feel when I'm walking down the street in my tallis and my shawl?
Let's see. Sometimes the way you're greeted, when if it's something like, hey, sweetheart, can you help me with this? Being told to smile in the friendliest way possible. Absolutely, all kinds of unsolicited help with parallel parking.
Really?
Being introduced in a group that you're maybe one member and part of a project, and nobody shakes your hand at first, or two men shake one another's hand and begin a conversation, and you sort of have to insert your own hand into the shake and say, hello, I'm Adrienne, I'm the director.
You still have to do that?
I mean, I can say that in the arts industry, sometimes people are more sensitive to that, and there's more, sometimes that's less true. But, when I drop my truck off at the mechanics, they sometimes, act like, who are you here with? All that kind of stuff. Crossing the street, being, ogled through a car window by some ding-dong with a,
With a ding-dong, actually, yeah.
But ding-dong with a ding-dong who thinks it's cute to, do that weird gesture.
I have to admit, I always wish I were ogled through a car window. Just once or twice. Could be a man, could be a woman, could be an animal. But so somebody looking at me and going, woohoo, you're looking good today, Rabbi. Nice beard.
Yeah, and maybe somebody does do that. But I have thought once about doing a project where, what would it be like to just go through the day where I did all those impulses and I hooted and hollered at every attractive person I saw, and then said, gave people advice about how to park, and like, you turn it to the left, like to some guy who's parallel parking for the 950th time that month. I don't go around the world doing that, but there's a lot of people who go around the world doing all those things without even questioning whether they should or shouldn't, or whether it's appreciated or not.
Well, you mentioned going around the world, which you have. You've, as a performer, you've even done some circus work. How different is it in America, the way you are dealt with as a woman, as opposed to other I assume Western Europe is more enlightened, and maybe you've been to some places where women walk 10 paces behind in a burqa. I don't know.
I have not had the opportunity to perform in any countries that, like, we as Americans would understand as, like, incredibly religiously repressive. So I can't really speak to that. In general, I find anywhere you go in the world, the same annoyances, the same unconscious fears, the same needs to assert yourself exist in most Western developed countries that I've spent any time in, whether you're in the city or the country, whether you're on stage or off.
Or, but even in places, let's say, like Latin America or Italy, that has certain views, male-dominated views of women. The man does this and behaves this way, and the woman, she cooks and she cleans and she wears the slippers. Did you experience any of that?
Not really. I don't really run in those circles. But, like, I remember when I was a kid, I went to Italy, and I remember a grown man, I was a kid, I was a teenager, a young woman, I suppose. I remember a man trying to rub up against me. I've been flashed in subways in New York. I've been flashed in England. I've been, maybe sometimes there's a slightly different tone or flair to the harassment in a different country, but it kind of all boils down to the same thing, which is that, like, too often, too many women have to expend too much energy deflecting shit like that. I feel a little sensitive today because a community I'm incredibly close to in Melbourne, a young, very promising female comic was walking home from a gig and was raped and murdered in the streets, where a ton of women I know walk home from comedy gigs all the time. And that feeling, and, of course, the newspapers have been warning women to be careful when they walk home. So I'm a little sensitive about it all today because being told to be careful when you walk home is, the dumbest fucking thing ever, because that doesn't stop it.
Right. Well, also, why should women have to be careful when they walk? Yeah, as opposed to...
Right.
Yeah, I mean, everybody has to be a little careful in a dark street, but still, why women specifically, and why is this still happening?
Women.
Yeah.
And for some people, for some women, walking home is the safe part, and it's actually when they get home that's the dangerous part.
Oh.
When people say, like, try to be aware, try to be more careful. And I think about all the times I've been like, okay, for whatever reason, I deflected this with humor, and that worked. And this time I deflected it with rage and said, like, you picked the wrong fucking lady, mister, and that worked. And when people say, like, be aware and be careful, part of me wants to go, God, do you know how much that young woman had to want to love comedy and do comedy to walk home every night by herself? We always know it's dangerous. We know that since we understand what the word danger means. We're told that.
Let me ask, though. I mean, you're a pretty left-wing person. I'm a fairly left-wing. So, but would you, should all the women carry a gun?
No.
Why?
All men should stop raping.
Well, yes, but men are not going to stop.
So, Rabbi, what I'm saying is, like, people can have that conversation, but the problem doesn't stop if women change their behavior. The problem only stops if the men who rape change their behavior. If they learn to understand that they are not entitled to behave like that. The only way it will ever change. If I heard that a woman was assaulted and had a gun on her and shot the guy, I would be like, well, that's a classic asking for it, mister.
Yes.
More so than wearing a miniskirt.
Sure, well, okay, fine. I'm just saying it's like to say, well, men should change their behavior and stop raping. Well, yeah, duh. But...
Yeah. But people don't have that conversation. They still say women should be careful. Women should learn self-defense. I don't want to waste my time learning self-defense. I want to spend my time writing jokes.
Okay.
I'm not raping anybody. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. I'm just saying it's like telling people who are overweight or have a little high blood pressure, don't eat. Or only eat really good things, and a lot of the time they will. But people are people, and a certain segment of the population is just going to eat what they want to eat. And if they're tipping the scales, so be it. So to tell men, by the way, bad guy who's a little bit psychotic, stop raping, that doesn't work.
No, but if you tell the culture that watch out for the bad guy, and that one guy who had one, complaint about him at work, he might be the guy. Keep an eye on him.
Okay. That's fair.
And, instead of telling women to take self-defense, I'm not saying you, of course, Rabbi, I'm saying instead of hearing the culture tell women, take self-defense classes, consider carrying a gun, why isn't the culture saying, gentlemen, take a class in women's studies. Understand what this is about. It's your job. You have to do it.
Here's the thing. Something that influenced you, or you said in an interview, that has really colored your worldview as a person and as an artist and as a feminist was when you were a teenager and you noticed that some guy, he didn't rape you, but he was taking pictures of you because you were swimming or something in a bathing suit. And that moment on some level was traumatic. Explain.
I don't know that, I guess there was a trauma involved in it. It was interesting to me because I just, I was 15 years old. I was babysitting somebody. I was on a beach. I was on a vacation. I was just learning, to understand my body myself, and I was alone other than this little kid I was looking after. And this man came down out of a house in Malibu, and he looked to a 15-year-old from New Jersey, felt like a very sort of fancy Hollywood person, and he just started taking photographs of me. He never said hello. He didn't speak to me. There was no one around to protect me, and he just kept moving in closer and closer and taking photos, and I was so just young and naive, and technically nothing happened, but I remember feeling scared. I remember feeling confused, slightly titillated, and to me it was just one of those moments of learning that, you're not just a teenager on the beach with the little boy who you babysit and adore, wondering whether you should go in for a swim or not, or if you should put sunscreen or not. You're a teenager on the beach that some possibly perverted, possibly predatory, and possibly dangerous man is descending upon when there's no one else around and taking these weird pictures of you and keeping them. And it felt like he was taking something from me. So that did not traumatize me physically. But
not physically, but it's something that's in your... What I'm saying is now when you go on a stage and the spotlight's hitting you, and you're being provocative and you're half naked, whatever it is, then is that getting back? Is that saying, okay, I'm owning the moment. You want to look at me, look all you want, because it's my show.
Absolutely. I also think it's much different I think it's part of why I love live performance so much, is that people's reaction to a woman's naked body, if that woman has agency and a mic and her voice is amplified and she's in charge, is a very different understanding of being around or looking at a naked woman's body than if it's in an ad or in a movie. And it's funny, I find that I can sort of read in an audience sometimes guys who are there maybe initially or partly for the titillation of the nudity, and that's fine. I don't care about that. But I notice their demeanor is challenged or changed. I'm sort of not behaving in any way that is passive or on display for someone's viewing pleasure. And I still think that can be really powerful. It might be personally powerful. I also still think it can be artistically and culturally powerful.
Well, can I ask, and by the way, we're talking with Adrienne Truscott, whom you can go see on June 27th, Friday night. She's doing her show, The One Trick Pony, at Joe's Pub, and that is kind of attached to the Public Theater downtown on Lafayette Street. By the way, if you happen to miss it, don't miss it on June 27th, but if you happen to not be in town, you can also catch it on August 4th and September 23rd, she'll be coming back and doing it again. But let me ask you, at what point did you start to feel like an artist?
Oh, that's such a lovely question, Rabbi.
Well, thank you.
I think the first performance I ever did was when I was about 6, like that I really remember, like, I'm going to do something. And funnily enough, it was to the theme song from Maude, and I was naked.
Okay.
But as an adult, I guess, when I moved to New York City and realized I had moved to New York City because I wanted to figure out what all this performing stuff was about. But I was confused about it for a long time. I think there was something about performing in these sort of like alternative radical scenes that made me think some of the stuff you do as a performer is really confronting and really vulnerable. And I had actually, it doesn't sound like it right now, but I had grown up as a very shy kid. I spent a lot of time alone and unsupervised and moved around a lot. Didn't feel like I got tons of sort of positive reinforcement. And there was something about, I was always really physical, and I liked dancing. And then as I got into more mature scenarios of that, like at college and stuff, I noticed a lot of it was really confronting, and it made me nervous to interact with people in these ways that felt more intimate and vulnerable. And I suddenly was like, I bet if you get past that shit, life would be a lot more fun if you're not afraid to sing out loud and get up and dance and do a funny little number in front of some people and make them laugh. So I think it was like the weird philosophy of performing that got me interested in it. And then slowly I realized that I could make dances, and that interested me, working with other people. And recently I've been more writing text and writing jokes.
Well, this is the interesting thing to me, because I called you an artist, and you took that as a compliment, which is great. And yet, there's something in the subtitle of your show, it almost seems like, hey, look, they call Andy Kaufman a comedian, and I don't get to be called a comedian. I just get to be called a performance artist. Am I misreading that?
No. It was sort of like I had always wanted to try stand-up comedy. I always listened to it as a kid, watched it on TV. And it always seemed really scary to me. So when I did that show asking for it, it was the first solo show I'd ever done, and I wrote an hour of jokes. And I stood up with a mic and a stool on small stages and told jokes for an hour. And I swear, in my heart of hearts, I was like, I'm doing stand-up. I'm a comedian. And I was always called, my show, always thankfully with very positive reviews, but I was still referred to always as a feminist performance artist. And I was like, wait a minute, I thought I just did an hour of stand-up. Why am I getting called that? And it just made me think of Andy, who never told jokes and was always doing these sort of large-scale performance art things. But he's always thought of as a comedian, and I was just sort of thinking about that.
And, of course, the funny part of all that is that Andy Kaufman was almost never really funny. You know, the Mickey Mouse thing was cute, but he never, you always wondered what he would do next, but it didn't usually, The Great Gatsby is not a load of giggles, if you know what I'm saying.
No, I know, it was always like, how much more uncomfortable would we feel at his next event?
I got some of the same vibe a couple of weeks ago when I was interviewing Penny Arcade. I'm sure you know who. And another person who, by the way, went through not one but several rapes. You should know from it. But turned that around and became a powerful feminist performer, but also a funny performer. Yeah. And yet nobody calls her a comedian per se. So I thought I would go there in the questioning,
Yeah.
But, you mentioned that you're a choreographer, and you've also, I said, worked in circuses. What are your circus skills? I'm just curious.
Oh, for about 15 years or so, I did doubles trapeze with Tanya Gagne, who's my Bava sister, and partner acrobatics. So, yeah, like doubles trapeze is kind of like two scantily clad funny monkeys climbing up and down each other.
Okay, well, that sounds pretty hot to me, but I mean, do you still do trapeze, or is that a little in the past at this point?
I haven't done it for a while, and mostly because I've been focusing on writing and been a little more interested in writing, and I injured my back a little bit. So, yeah, I've been doing less circus stuff, but I still sort of participate in the circus community. I really loved it when I was doing it really constantly full-time, because circus in some ways is just, well, quite literally a big tent that you can do kind of anything you want under. You can try the impossible. You can try things that shouldn't work.
Juggling chainsaws, for example, which I have tried and I do not recommend.
No, not so good?
Not good at all. Not, that's why they call me Nine-Finger Sol. It's a terrible experience I had. But I'm kidding, I'm teasing. Let me also ask you, though, about dance, because you have a very particular kind of performance style and circus style, and yet you've taught at a couple of universities. You've taught at Yale, my God. Do you teach regular choreography in the Jerome Robbins, Martha Graham mode, or do you have a special, or what do you do?
I really love working with people who like to move or move well but aren't necessarily trained in dance, like in the ways that, in a sort of Balanchine or Martha Graham or, I quite like pedestrian movement. I think it's really fun to see people move in ways that sort of surprise us because we're not, a lot of times when you think of dance, you either think of, these incredibly physically virtuosic bodies dancing, or, really like the joke on it, like really bad, annoying contemporary dance, maybe barely moving or something.
That would be me, yes.
I think I get turned on by different people, and so I tend to just put people that I get, that I find charismatic and smart and funny, and put them in a dance and make us all find some weird way to move. But I was taught choreography by people who had more of like a jazz sensibility about it, like that you can come up with structures and then fuck with them a bit.
Okay.
Opposed to like, hey, I made all these moves and I'm going to teach them to you and then you're going to do them.
Now, sorry, please, yes.
That's okay, go ahead.
Well, also I wanted to ask, there's a question. Since you like all comedians and performance artists, you try and push the envelope. You want to go a little bit further. You want to look over the edge, sometimes jump over it. Can anything be funny?
I believe that anything can be made funny, looked at in a way that is humorous, even if that is satire or ironic. I don't think that everything is funny, but I think humor is a very deft way to talk about things. So yes, there is a way. I don't think everything should be made funny by everybody all the time. I don't ever mean to censor somebody else, but I think...
Well, let me throw an example to you that bothered me about something that you said in an interview when Daniel Tosh made a rape joke, right? And on a show that pushes the envelope regularly and decisively, definitively. And to me, as a white-ish male, the joke was funny. It wasn't nice, but it was funny. To you, it was like, he shouldn't have made that joke. But a woman, I can make that joke from my experience, etc.
But I've never said that.
Oh.
I think I may have been taken out of context, and I will try to, and I'm genuine about this because I hear what you're saying, but I've never actually said that. I think anybody should be able to make a joke about anything they want. I happen to think that Daniel Tosh's joke sucked. I've never said I don't think he should make it. In fact, I'm quite glad that he does, because I think the more he makes jokes that are not that thoughtful and play to a sycophantic crowd, the more he looks like an asshole, and the more his humor becomes irrelevant.
So, you don't want to censor him, but I have to say that I found the joke... I wasn't laughing, rolling on the floor, but the sheer outrageousness of it made me laugh, which is ding, 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 for me it was funny.
The joke you mean at the Laugh Factory when he did, wouldn't it be funny if she got raped right now?
That's a funny joke, I'm sorry. It's so outre. Yeah.
I'm not saying it's not funny for you. I fully understand and accept that comedy is subjective. All I wanted to do was say, I think his joke is lazy. I think it's not edgy, because I think there's a ton of dudes basically saying the same thing. And all I wanted to do was make different jokes about the same topic, and maybe even joke about how shit I thought his joke was. But I've never, ever said he should make that joke, or Jim Jeffries, or any of those guys shouldn't make those jokes.
Okay, no, I did misquote, or I did explain. I mansplained, perhaps, in saying that you were against making that joke. But you were certainly saying that a joke that I found funny, you didn't. But that happens all the time. That can happen with a knock-knock joke. You know,
all the time, yeah.
So, actually, I can't think of any knock-knock jokes on the top. Otherwise, I would tell one. Shame on me. I need to keep my knock-knock jokes much handier. Let me ask you also, though, all right, what is, then, your favorite sick, outrageous joke? It could be one of your own, or one that you've heard over the years. It could be any horrible topic.
Any horrible topic.
Well, it could be rape, but that doesn't, that's your wheelhouse. It doesn't have to be there.
Oh golly. This is the kind of thing that happens when you get asked these questions on the spot. I mean, when I was a kid, I liked all those, like, weird dead baby jokes.
Oh, yeah.
There are jokes that I laugh at that I don't, that I kind of don't like, and am surprised to hear myself laughing, and I laugh at it. I can't think of any right now, Rabbi, because I feel suddenly on the spot.
No, but I love that you admit.
There are jokes that I wrote for my show that I think are funny, but I actually find too offensive not too offensive. I decided not to put them in my show. They seem too harsh.
Well, can we hear one, if you remember one?
Okay, I'm going to try and do one. I think it's like, unless you're doing your whole show, I think it is really easy to be able to really fuck up a joke in an interview. And
sure. No, I mean, we understand this is not the context of you in...
Want me to tell you one joke that I think is funny that I don't tell in my show that I wrote because I think it's pretty fucked?
Go for it, please.
Okay. I was at university, and I went to a speak out. I was walking home from work, and a woman described something that had happened to her, and she used the word rape, and I sort of stopped dead in my tracks, and I was like, what are you talking about? That happened to me. And I'd never used that word to describe what happened to me. And I was so stunned by the revelation, because it had happened recently. It was sort of that moment that you realize. And I was frozen. I was paralyzed. I couldn't move, which is truly the only reason I was still standing there because I just didn't know how to move in my body, because I was, I guess, what they say, called triggered. That I was still standing there when another woman got up and described something that had also happened to me, that she also used the word rape for, and which I had never applied that word to that experience with me, because a lot of the times a woman doesn't want to think that that's happened to her. So anyway, there I was standing there, and I ran home to my best friend, and I was crying, and she was like, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh my God, not to brag, but I've been raped twice." And she's like, "Jesus Christ, just now?" And I was like, No. It was a little while ago, but oh my God, what am I going to do? This is terrible. I'm a mess. And she's like, "What did you do? What did you do?" And I said, "Well, I'm not stupid. I got the fuck out of there before I found out I was raped 3 times.
That's funny. That is, it's a little harsh, yes, and any joke you make about rape, even a woman who was raped, making that, but no, that's funny. That should go in your next show. Or maybe in my show.
Have I?
Yes.
Yeah.
or maybe I should do the joke. I don't know if it would work for me. I don't. But here's a question then. We talked about the current climate that we're in. If you could sit down with Harvey Weinstein or Bill Cosby or me, and no touching, no violence, what would you tell them for like 5 minutes? If you had 5 minutes in a room with these peoples.
No violence?
A little violence, but nothing deadly.
Today I crave violent retribution. I know it's to no good end. That's what I crave. But, wow, what would I say to them? I don't even know if I'd sit in the fucking room with those guys.
Okay. Well, wait. You just said that you don't want women carrying guns to change the culture. Instead, we should tell men what to do. Now I'm giving you 5 minutes with men to tell them what the hell to do. No back, and you just want to club them to death.
It's not my fucking job anymore. It's not my job. I should not have to take any more time out of my life to tell some monster that he doesn't get to rape me anymore.
But that's exactly what you do in your act. It's just you're sitting there with
because I enjoy doing that. It's my act. It's my art.
Yeah, but your art is really talking half to women, but also to the men in the audience who may not ever, God forbid, rape anybody, but who have perhaps aggressive tendencies, or they're repressing rape instincts, or they see a hot girl on the street and they don't call out, but in their minds they're going, hoo-hoo. So you're talking to them, no?
Yeah. Yes, I do, and I talk to them regularly, and they come to my shows. And I would very willingly do my show for an audience of Harvey Weinstein, Bill Cosby, Louis C.K.
Oh God, Garrison Keillor. I mean, the list.
Charlie
Rose, right?
Those motherfuckers in a room and do my show for them, and then yell at them after the show, perhaps.
Okay, well, yelling is good. I yell all the time. That's very cathartic for me, I must say. So let me also say is because you deal in the stuff that you deal with, and you get women in your audience, how often after you do a show, you just want to sit in your dressing room, decompress, have a cup of tea, go home, and instead you got to take half an hour because some woman comes up to you and says, "I've never told this to anybody, but oh, this happened to me," and she starts crying. Do you have to become a therapist every time you do a show?
I decided when I was making this show that I would take time if anyone wanted to talk to me after the show. I just sort of decided if I was putting this type of material out into the world and people were taking, maybe a personal risk in coming to see it, that I would make myself available afterwards, because I thought some people are going to challenge me on doing this kind of material or seeming to be joking about it when it's, satire, and I thought, well, I should be able to answer for my jokes. If I decide to put them on stage, I should be able to defend them. And also some people, mostly women and occasionally men, come up and talk to me about having been assaulted. Sometimes they say that, having a weird chance to laugh at it is the first time they've felt any kind of breakthrough.
Ooh.
I've had men come up and say that it made them question some of their past behavior.
That's good. Yeah. So I'm just saying.
I've had some pretty intense times after my show. Occasionally I have to remind myself to take a second in the dressing room and say, not everyone who comes up to you after the show might be a nice person. Because every once in a while there's some guy who tries to come up and start with a compliment and then says something really gross to me.
Ooh, okay.
Thank God that has not happened very often, because I think by the end of the show most guys are a little bit intimidated.
Yeah, happens at my sermons, I should say. But but here's the question I also want to ask you is, I don't want you, and you certainly don't want to be known as a one-trick pony. That is the title of your current show, because asking for it was very much about feminism and dealing with rape and rape culture, etc.
Yeah.
But now you wanted to turn around and do something different. You did that, right? Yeah. And you're still sort of expected on some level to be dealing with all that, but what did you put into your new show? Why is it different?
My new show just is not an hour of rape jokes,
right,
for one thing. And it's kind of like a much more absurdist show in the way that it is an homage to Andy Kaufman. I, in some ways, thought of some of my favorite things he did, and in that way that you wish you'd thought of it, but you didn't, so you can never do that material, and there's a sort of, pain in that. I tried to, steal as much of his material in a way that I think is funny, not really stealing it. So I kind of used a lot of his most memorable gags, like Mighty Mouse and wrestling, to sort of make the structure of my show, ways that I could get away with almost doing his material. And that was kind of the joke of a one-trick pony, the joke being like, what if she doesn't have anything after rape jokes? What if that's all she can joke about? But, it's sort of like all the tropes of comedy. I do some really funny storytelling. There's a lot of loop-in callbacks.
A lot of callbacks, you said?
Yeah.
Meaning, what do you mean by that? I'm sorry.
Like when you set up a joke and then, or you're doing a joke and you toss a few other things out there and everyone thinks they're just like irrelevant details, but like 20 minutes later you call back to it.
Oh, that's wonderful. Oh, those are the best. Those are absolutely the best. I did a one-person show a few years ago, and I said something horrible and terrible that wasn't particularly funny, but when I referenced it 15 minutes later, people were like, oh, that's the
best, right?
Isn't it? Oh, my God. So let me ask, how do you conceive of a bit? Do you start with a vague idea and then follow it, or do you suddenly get the punchline first in your head, or is there an effect, since you're very visual, that you go from and then you add the words to it? What's your process?
It kind of comes from all over the place, and that might be from my performance arty background. Like, I don't sit down for an hour a day and just like try to write jokes, and I know a lot of comics that do that as their practice. I feel like I'll see something in the world, and it either makes me laugh or makes me mad in that way that it's like you think it's funny because you're like, how fucked up is that? Sometimes a punchline comes to me right away, like the joke I told you that's not in my show. I don't know. That happened in real life.
Right.
Like that is what I said to my friend when I said not to brag, but I've been raped twice.
But it turned into a fun, even though it was true. It was a punchline that you then topped. Well, I got out of there before. I was raped three times in the past. Yeah. So,
it's different ways. It doesn't all come to me the same way, but I do kind of know that, like, once there's kind of I had really been thinking about Andy Kaufman and like, how is he a comedian and I'm not? And what's the play between those different categories? And so something like, so Andy Kaufman wrestled women. How much more feminist performance artist can you be than that? He was saying, like, we're equal. I'll wrestle you. I might lose, I might win. And nobody knew if he was doing it as a joke or if he had lost his mind. And I thought, well, what would be the invert? Like, what would that be for me? And I was like, well, that would be me wrestling a guy from the audience, maybe at the end of my show.
Is that what you do? You get a guy? Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is another reason for everybody to go see... Well, did you notice that smooth segue there? The One Trick Pony at Joe's Pub on Friday evening, June 27th. And Joe's Pub is connected to the Public Theater on Lafayette Street downtown. And again, if you happen to miss it this time, it will be back on August 4th and September 23rd. Just have one or two more quick questions for the delightful Adrienne Truscott here in the neighborhood. And just for a moment, I do want to get a little bit personal and wonder, what is your home life? Do you have a partner? Are you dating? Do you have a commitment thing? Or are you just out there, etc. and so forth?
I do have a partner. His name is Carmine Cavelli. He's a drummer in the band The Julie Ruin.
Oh, it's always the drummers. The girls, I don't care how feminist you are, the girls go for the drummers. What can I tell you?
And he drums for Bridget Everett in The Tender Moments, who you might have heard of. She's hilarious and often at Joe's Pub. And we've been together for like 16 years, I think it is now. And sometimes we work together, but he does a lot of his own projects. He's made a lot of video and audio content for my shows. And he is a great fucking guy. He's smart, and he's sweet, and he's really, like, open to learning about all the new shit you got to process in this new era of Me Too.
Are feminists kind of disappointed that you are settled in a way with a man, that you're not out there as a lesbian or as a gender questioning? You are cis, as it were, for you're a woman who knows she's a woman is a woman, but are people sometimes disappointed and don't go, oh my God, you have a boyfriend for all these years?
Well, Well, I hope they are, but I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I suppose I'm a fifth straight gal at this point because the person I fell in love with is a guy. But I would identify more as bisexual. I haven't only and always spent time with men. And in terms of the art making, I think the art making I do is pretty queer. And my community of art makers that I adore and am influenced by and inspired by are pretty gender questioning and queer.
So you can be somewhat fluid, but within the confines of your personal life, you've got this great drummer fella.
Yeah.
Well, mazel tov.
Yeah.
Well, that's. But my only disappointment is with Carmine. Well, he's not Jewish. He couldn't make a nice Jewish boy. And
I think it's pretty safe to say he's Italian.
And you are? What's your background?
I'm pretty much English.
Ooh.
My mother's and all my background's English.
Well,
I was raised in the States, but.
And last question for you. You mentioned obviously your current show being very influenced by Andy Kaufman. Are there comedians, actors, performance artists whom you, if not idolize, but who are very important to you, either in growing up and becoming a performance artist yourself, or of recent vintage that you really look up to and have learned from?
Of recent vintage?
It could be, or of the past.
Yeah. Golly. I can tell you this. When I was little, I loved B. Arthur to the ends of the earth.
B. Arthur, yes!
That's an early one. When I saw B. Arthur as Maud, that was like, as a little kid, even though I didn't have the language for it, I was like, she's funny, she's a feminist, like, that's my chick. I still love her to this day.
Oh.
Recently, I was very thrilled by Michelle Wolf's performance at the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
Okay, you're kind of in the minority on that one, but all right, fair enough.
You what? I what?
You're sort of in the minority on that one. A lot of people were like, don't know, but okay.
Yeah, no, I was very happy she did it. Got in there and caused as much trouble as she could, and then got out.
And who else?
Oh, my goodness. There's a comic named Desiree Birch, who I think is fantastic. She's mostly in London right now, an African-American woman who is, like, just fast and sharp as heck. I love Sarah Silverman. I think she's super smart.
And Jewish, by the way. I don't know if you knew that.
And
but
Jewish,
yes.
and a nice Jewish girl, Rabbi.
Yes.
Murray Hill is one of my favorite comedians.
Oh, he's been around. He's a not drag. What do they call that? Male drag. What's the word for it?
Drag king or trans?
Drag king. That's it. Yes. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Gosh. I guess not all my influences are comedic, but Andy Kaufman's a big one because he just pushed the envelope and confused everybody so deeply and put so much on the line for the thrill of doing that.
Well, we are thrilled and delighted that you, Adrienne Truscott, put things on the line to make comedy, to make art, to make performances. Again, go see her at Joe's Pub Friday night, June 27th. We thank you so much, Adrienne, for being with us in the neighborhood.
Thank you, Rabbi. It's been a delight to talk to you.
You too, and shalom to you.
Shalom.